Last week, we brought you a story on a bill moving through the state legislature that would ban hydraulic fracking in Hawaii. The measure had geothermal implications. It would prevent the use of enhanced geothermal systems in Hawaii, should a future developer wish to explore such a technology. The bill attracted the usual advocates and opponents of geothermal energy on Hawaii Island. But that wasn't the only geothermal bill on the agenda that day in the House committee. House Bill 2639, considered favorable to development, clarifies permitting procedures for regulators, requires the use of an area within a conservation district to be governed by the Land Board, and authorizes certain county authorities to issue geothermal resource permits. It also reserves all minerals in, on, or under reserved lands to the state.
As geothermal is moving forward, we need to ensure that the regulatory framework is clarified. This measure is doing exactly that. We need to make sure that it's clear in our law that anyone who wants to explore developing geothermal has to get a permit from the DLNR. That's not really been clarified. Another point that we need to really take care of is to ensure that people understand that geothermal resources belong to the state public trust. Right now there's a renewed effort on the part of private property owners to say that they own the minerals. And this matter, they tried to litigate this matter in the past. So it's important that the state reaffirm that minerals belong in the trust, and it is a question of revenues for the state because of the geothermal revenue.
I want to talk about three issues on why we're opposing this bill. First, I wanted to point out that the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, or NARUC, and the Public Utilities Commission hired a company called Energy and Environmental Economics, or E3, out of San Francisco. And in January, they filed a report on the evaluation of Hawaii's renewable energy policy and procurement. I want to read you what they said on page 38. Quote, "HELCO does not need new capacity reserves until 2035, unquote. HECO needs a generator in 21 years. Therefore, we have to hurry, 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 and cut out the public. It doesn't make much sense. Second, there are two fundamental issues facing the Big Island. One of them has been raised here, which is finding a way to reduce rates. A second fundamental issue is how to integrate the explosion in rooftop solar. You do not want to solve one problem by putting in a generator that interferes with the other problem. You want to make careful sure that whatever solution you come up with reduces rates and allows greater integration of PV. I have not heard anybody today say that they are looking at both issues. The PUC is. The third issue deals with the recent RPS, the request for proposal put out by HELCO. They said, look, we want to have a series of meetings with the community. We want all geothermal companies to come forward. We want to find out if there are companies out there that can reduce our rates, meet our safety, and meet our reliability criteria. They found none. Thank you.
When we say that the price of geothermal is high, like what HELCO announced in the paper, it's probably, and that's probably part of the main reason why it's high is because they wouldn't commit to taking so much. So the people that bid have to bid high in case they couldn't sell it. It is the curtailed energy that's the problem. So that's one thing. Now another thing is, I was in Iceland and in one of these geothermal plants. It was 30 years old. You could eat off the floor. I asked the manager, hey, looks to me like you guys could last another 30 years. He says, yeah, I think so. Now think about that. 60 years for the initial investment as compared to solar. 25 years, either your roof can fall out, you're going to have to repair your roof, or you're going to have to change them. It's a real short time span. It's not sustainable. We got to find solutions, and one of the solutions is this: hydrogen. With geothermal, we can go to hydrogen because if the electricity costs 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and you generate it on the site right there, you could get a gallon of gas equivalent. So by the time the hydrogen cars come, you could actually start to move toward the hydrogen economy.
The county put in a home rule measure about 25 years ago. That is the language in 2639. 2639 restores the county process. The process provided for the Planning Commission to have a public hearing, open to everyone. If disagreements arose, then those in disagreement went to mediation. Following good faith efforts in mediation, they returned for a second public hearing. If it could not be resolved at that time, the process provides for immediate appeal to the State Intermediate Court of Appeals. It goes straight up. That was the process the county wrote. That was the process the county has tried to get back in. That's why Mayor Kinoy is testifying. Onishi has sent testimony from our county council.
On the other hand, House Bill 1766, backed by geothermal opponents, restores the geothermal resource subzones that were repealed in Act 97 and establishes a permitting process for geothermal resources development.
Geothermal subzones were imposed 25 years ago when there was the first push to develop geothermal. If you take a look at what was required, they were supposed to be doing test drilling to find out on the Big Island where the most appropriate areas were. They did some drilling, but they didn't have the money that was needed. They needed actually over $90 million, and the state didn't have geoengineers. They pulled together the data that they had, including information from wells for water drilling. Then they had some discussions with the DLNR. What they decided to do was a political solution. They took a pen, they drew circles around the East Rift Zone, and those who were participating, Bishop Estate, the Olsons, the Greenwells, they were very powerful. They put a circle around Hualalai, even though the geothermics report showed very low-level resource, but it was owned by the Greenwells, Bishop Estate. The development went up on Papa Lyman's land. He was the chair, Bishop Estate at the time. What happened was they did not address the appropriate way to develop geothermal, and I've been doing it for 14 years. When you develop geothermal, you do it very cautiously, only where science indicates the resource is plentiful and it can be developed safely. Then the geothermal area is limited to the footprint of the project. What they did to us on the Big Island was they circled the entire East Rift Zone, hundreds of miles, thousands of acres. And every residential area, every school, every park suddenly became an area open for geothermal development, inappropriate on the Big Island. We do not need to go backwards. We do not need geothermal subzones.
The bill also requires the Board of Land and Natural Resources and the counties to implement the recommendations of the 2013 final report of the Geothermal Public Health Assessment Study Group prior to issuing permits for future geothermal development.
In terms of the health study, I would really suggest that you might want to take a look at what Mr. Patrici and others are saying is a health study. No one that conducted the study had any background in medical toxicology. There was one old retired medical person. All the rest of them were Bob Patrici and his friends. If you haven't read the report that we all were sent publicly, the health report, I think you should. There were only 3 real groups of cases that moved forward on the health issue. The 130 that Mr. Patrici is talking about that never proved health but got 2 million, he himself has admitted that he got tens of thousands but won't tell us how many. The second point I think that is important in this in terms of health is that it is under the jurisdiction of the Department of Health. Where's the Department of Health? They didn't come in last year. They didn't come in this year. Because they did their report in 1997,
Can I ask you to summarize?
which you haven't looked at, and they found that this was not only not credible, but it was bogus. It was a fraud.
Punapona Alliance has only been in existence for 2 years and has never been involved in any litigation at all. I did receive a settlement of tens of thousands. I can't disclose it because it was a confidentiality agreement. And I am not on the list for relocation. I've never received any relocation monies. I sold my house for peanuts and moved away from the current geothermal power plant because the relocation process doesn't work. And now they want to build another power plant next to my new farm.
You may remember that at the national level, cigarette smoking was declared to cause cancer back in the 40s or 50s. The scientific proof was not found until 1996. So although the federal government was actively saying it in the 80s and 90s, you could actually get up and say there's no causal proof until 1996. There are all kinds of contaminants out in the environment. You can say if you can't prove the direct link between a contaminant and an illness, that that illness is not caused by the contaminant. National Park Service puts up warnings about breathing volcanic gases on federal parkland, but unless you can show the specific link, it doesn't count, according to some. And there are all kinds of corporations who have been caught for all kinds of wrongdoing, and they plead guilty for a fine without admitting guilt. It's a convenient mechanism where you don't actually plead guilt, but you recognize that you're guilty and you make a payment. To say that that doesn't prove guilt is fine. That's a technicality. We do know that volcanic gases does impact health. We do know there have been accidental releases in the Puna area from geothermal well digging. So you can't prove the specific link, but it seems to me that it makes sense that it should be regulated and we need greater health analysis. Thank you.
In the end, the first measure passed with amendments. House Bill 2639 now advances to the Finance Committee. The second bill was deferred.